I'm fine. 2 words. Soft enough to be ignored, sharp enough to keep you out. They sound like closure, but really, they're a locked door, a whispered scream, a carefully stitched wound still bleeding underneath. Nietzsche once wrote, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." But what if your monster is silence? What if the person smiling the most is the one screaming the loudest inside? They say, it's fine, because they've learned something dangerous. That vulnerability is a currency too expensive in a world that deals in power. That if you show pain, someone might use it. So instead, they smile, they nod, they laugh at the right moments. And when the weight becomes too much, they whisper, I'm fine. But here's the truth. People who say it the most often carry the heaviest stories. They don't want you to worry. They don't want to be a burden. So they tuck the chaos behind practiced eyes and master the art of being okay when they're not. You'll see it in their posture, not hunched, not defeated, but perfectly upright, as if they're holding up an entire world that might collapse if they tilt too far. You'll hear it in their voice, calm, smooth, controlled, like someone who's learned to speak in soft waves so the storm doesn't escape. Because the truth is, they've been made to feel that their feelings are too much. So now they shrink. They shrink to fit the comfort of others. They shrink until silence becomes their only safe place. But don't mistake their quiet for peace. It's often self-defense. Because being misunderstood over and over again teaches you that your truth is better hidden. They learned to wear masks, not the theatrical kind, but the daily, invisible ones that smile on cue, laugh politely, and say, it's fine, when their world is crumbling. Why? Because once, maybe more than once, they opened up and were met with silence, or worse, judgment, advice instead of empathy, dismissal disguised as positivity. And so they stopped. They stopped trying to explain the way their chest tightens at night. They stopped describing the ache of feeling alone in a room full of people. They stopped being honest about the fear of never feeling safe enough to be real. And now, they've become masters at appearing okay. The strongest person in your life, the one who never complains, the one who makes you laugh when you're down, check on them. Because some people don't cry in front of others. Not because they don't feel, but because feeling out loud has never been safe. Nietzsche believed that suffering isn't what breaks us. It's meaningless suffering that poisons us slowly. And people who say, I'm fine over and over again, often suffer in silence because their pain has been invalidated too many times. They weren't born closed off. They became that way, little by little, moment by moment. Each time someone said, you're too sensitive. Each time they were punished for expressing fear, or sadness, or need. Each time someone told them, it's not that big of a deal. So now, they deal with everything alone. And the saddest part? They're often the ones who help others the most. Because they know what it feels like to have no one. They become healers, listeners, the reliable one, the strong friend, the wise sibling, the silent partner. They give endlessly because they've trained themselves to believe their value is in being useful, not human. But deep down, they are exhausted from carrying everyone's pain while hiding their own. Exhausted from pretending, exhausted from never being asked, what's underneath your "I'm fine"? Because they're not fine. They're just used to it, used to being the one who adjusts, used to suppressing their needs, used to feeling too much and showing too little, used to wondering if anyone will ever see them, really see them, without needing a breakdown to prove it. And if you've made it this far, maybe that person is you. Maybe you've spent years being the strong one, the peacekeeper, the one who makes sure everyone else is okay. But what about you? What if I told you that being seen isn't a luxury? It's a necessity. That saying, "I'm not okay," doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. And honesty is the first crack in the wall silence built around you. Nietzsche didn't tell us to avoid suffering. He told us to give it meaning, to transform it, to look at our pain and say, "I see you. You matter. You're not something to hide." You were never too sensitive. You were just surrounded by people too numb to understand depth. You were never too emotional. You were just punished for having a heart in a world that rewards indifference. But the cost of silence is identity. The more you say, "I'm fine," when you're not, the more you forget what truth feels like. And eventually, you look in the mirror and wonder, who am I when no one is watching? That's the real wound. And the only way to heal it is to speak. Even if your voice trembles, even if no one understands yet. Because every time you break your silence, you come home to yourself, and the world, if it's ready, will finally meet the real you. But not everyone will stay, and that is where it gets even deeper. They don't just stay silent. They begin to believe the silence. At first, it's just a defense, a way to survive. But slowly, something darker takes root. They stop sharing their truth, and then they stop trusting it. The person who once felt deeply now questions their own feelings. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe it isn't that bad. Maybe I should just get over it. This is what Nietzsche warned about. A person turns inward not to explore, but to escape. Not to discover themselves, but to disappear from what hurts. When you've been hurt enough times, for being real, you start to build a version of yourself that fits what others expect. Smiling when you're tired. Agreeing when you want to scream. Saying yes when everything inside you says no. And over time, you forget what authenticity feels like. You become a mirror, reflecting what others need. Not a person, expressing what you need. That's the invisible tragedy of the wounded. They blend in. They overfunction. They keep everything running, so no one notices they're falling apart. They answer messages. They show up to work. They help their friends. And all the while, their own soul is begging for someone, anyone, to ask, is this really you? Or is this just who you became to be accepted? And the truth is, most people won't ask that, because your comfort masks their discomfort. Your silence keeps their world in order. You not needing anything means they don't have to offer anything. That's the game the world plays. But Nietzsche wasn't interested in games. He believed in peeling away illusions, especially the ones we build around ourselves. He believed that the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves to survive. So ask yourself this. Have you become so used to hiding that even you can't find yourself? It's okay to admit it. In fact, it's necessary. Because you can't heal what you pretend doesn't hurt. You can't rebuild your self-worth in silence. Because silence doesn't just protect you. It erases you. It flattens your colors. It makes you small, digestible, easy to love from a distance. But you were never meant to be easy. You were meant to be full of contradiction, of chaos, of feelings that make no sense to others, but are completely valid to you. You were meant to be messy and alive and deeply human, not robotic, not perfect, not always okay. But the wounded, they learn how to perform okayness. They become actors in their own life. They memorize their lines. I'm good, thanks. No worries. Don't mind me. They shrink their needs to protect other people's comfort. And in doing so, they pay a heavy price. Because after years of hiding, even joy feels unfamiliar. Even peace feels like a trick, like something that will be taken away once they let their guard down. They sit in rooms filled with laughter and feel like strangers. They watch people fall in love and wonder if anyone could ever see them. Not the role they play, but the soul they've buried. And when no one asks, they take it as proof. Proof that they don't matter. Proof that their silence was the right choice. Proof that vulnerability is still too dangerous. But here's the twist. The world didn't reject their truth. The world never got the chance to meet it, because they learned early on to hide the most precious parts of themselves, not because they were weak, but because they were aware. Aware that not everyone deserves access. Aware that being open in the wrong room can destroy you. So they built walls, not to trap themselves, but to stay safe. And yet, the longer they stay behind those walls, the harder it becomes to know who they are without them. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." But people who always say, "I'm fine," have lost their why. They live for others, to maintain the peace, to keep things stable, but never for themselves. They become ghosts in their own life, not because they want to disappear, but because no one noticed them when they were fully there. And this is the real heartbreak. The person who says, "I'm fine," might be the one hurting the most, because no one ever stays long enough to hear the silence behind those words. Because silence has a sound. It's the sound of brushing off compliments because you never believe them, laughing too quickly to fill awkward pauses, apologizing for crying, feeling guilty for needing, pretending you're okay so others can stay comfortable. But here's what Nietzsche would want you to remember. Comfort is not the same as truth. And peace, built on suppression, is not peace. It's quiet suffering. If your entire life is about being agreeable, you'll wake up one day a stranger to your own soul. And the scariest part is no one will notice, because you've trained them not to. You've trained the world to believe in the mask you wear better than the face underneath. But masks are heavy, even the smiling ones, especially the smiling ones. And you deserve a life where you don't have to wear one. You deserve a life where someone sees you, not for how helpful or pleasant you are, but for who you are when you stop performing. Where your "I'm fine" is replaced by "I'm struggling. I need help. I'm hurting today, and I don't want to be alone." Because that is strength, not silence. And the people who can hold your truth without flinching, those are the ones worth keeping. But what happens when no one is around to hear you? That's where the next truth begins. And it's the most uncomfortable one yet, because it's not about the world anymore. It's about you, and the ways you keep abandoning yourself, even when no one else does. There's a moment, quiet and devastating, when you realize it's no longer the world that's ignoring your pain. It's you. Not because you enjoy it, not because you're proud, but because the idea of finally being seen feels more dangerous than staying invisible. This is the real tragedy of the wound that says, "I'm fine." It becomes part of your identity, a second skin, not just what you say, but who you think you are. You tell yourself it's strength, that you don't need much, that you've learned to be independent, that you've moved on. But in the silence of your own mind, you hear the cracks. You hear the conversations you never had. You replay the moments you should have cried, but didn't. You remember how many times you whispered, "It's okay," just so others wouldn't feel guilty. And each time you buried the pain, you sent a message to your own soul. Your feelings are too much. Your needs are too messy. Your presence must always be pleasant. And so the self begins to fracture, not all at once, slowly, quietly, in forgotten hobbies, in the friendships you stop reaching out to, in the voice that trembles when it tries to say, "I'm not okay." Nietzsche knew that when you silence your suffering long enough, you become numb to joy too, because the heart doesn't discriminate. If you close it to pain, you close it to everything. You become safe, but unfeeling, functional, but hollow. People admire your composure. They say you're strong. They call you low maintenance, easygoing, resilient, but they don't see the cost. They don't see the tears that never fall, the love you don't believe you deserve, the conversations you rehearse in your head but never have in real life. You've trained the world to love your mask. And now, you don't know how to take it off. Because what happens when you do? What if the real you, the unfiltered, unedited, emotionally honest you, is too much, too complicated, too intense, too broken? So you say, "It's fine" again, and the cycle repeats. But Nietzsche would tell you, you are not here to be agreeable. You are here to become whole, not half a person, shaped by fear, not a shadow of yourself living through performance, but a soul that burns bright, even if it scorches the comfort of others. Because wholeness requires discomfort. It asks you to walk back through the parts of yourself you abandoned. It asks you to say what you've never said, to cry for what you minimized, to rage for what you forgave too quickly, to feel fully the grief of your own suppression. That's not weakness. That's power. Raw, untamed, unapologetic power. And yes, it's terrifying, because it means being honest in a world that benefits from your silence. It means choosing truth over performance. And truth doesn't always look pretty. Sometimes it looks like shaking hands and a racing heart before you finally tell someone how they hurt you. Sometimes it looks like walking away from people who only love the version of you that asks for nothing. Sometimes it looks like spending time alone, not as punishment, but as healing. Because healing requires space. And in that space, something miraculous happens. You begin to hear yourself again, not the version of you shaped by trauma, not the one addicted to being liked, not the one who confuses peace with people-pleasing, the real you, the one who feels everything deeply, the one who used to dream loudly, the one who once believed that their feelings mattered. That version isn't gone. It's waiting behind every "I'm fine" you've ever said, waiting for the moment you stop managing everyone else's emotions and start honoring your own. And the moment you do, the world shifts, because you stop settling. You stop performing. You stop confusing approval with love, and you start attracting people who want your truth, not your compliance. But first, you must break the contract you made with your pain, the one that says, if I don't speak, I won't be hurt. If I don't feel, I won't be abandoned. If I don't need anything, they'll stay. That contract has expired. It may have protected you once, but now it's a prison. Nietzsche would say, become who you are. And who you are is not someone who is meant to survive silently. You were meant to live, fully, messily, beautifully. Even if your voice shakes, even if people misunderstand, even if you lose those who only loved your silence, because those people were never your people. Your people are the ones who see through the "I'm fine" and ask again, the ones who don't flinch when you're honest, the ones who meet your truth with theirs. But here's the hardest part. Sometimes those people don't arrive until after you become that person for yourself. You have to hear yourself first. You have to sit with the parts of you that are still aching. You have to hold your own hand before anyone else can. Because healing doesn't begin with others. It begins with the moment you decide to stop betraying yourself. So the next time you want to say, "I'm fine," pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what am I really feeling right now? And what would happen if I let someone see it? Maybe the answer will scare you. Maybe it will set you free. But either way, it's a beginning. And in that beginning, something ancient and sacred returns. Your truth, your voice, your self-respect. Not the polite version. Not the one that makes everyone else comfortable. The one that says, I'm not okay right now, but I'm not hiding anymore. And that moment, that small, quiet rebellion, is the most powerful thing you will ever do. Because it's not just for you. It's for every part of you that was silenced. Every version of you that was told to shrink. And when that part rises, when it finally speaks, it will not say, I'm fine. It will say something that breaks every old pattern and begins a new life. I deserve to be seen. Somewhere between silence and survival, something shifts. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way a door finally unlocks after years of jamming. The kind of shift that starts with a question, not for the world, but for yourself. What would my life look like if I stopped pretending I'm fine? It's a dangerous question, because once you ask it, everything begins to crack. The friendships you kept for safety begin to feel suffocating. The jobs you stayed in to avoid failure begin to feel like cages. The smiles you practiced to appear normal start to feel like betrayal. And this time, you can't unfeel it. You start to notice the little moments where you shrink, the micro compromises that chip away at your soul. the way you edit your words mid-sentence just to keep things smooth. But smooth isn't real, and you're starting to hunger for what is. Nietzsche once wrote that the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. And the tribe, your family, your friends, your culture, has trained you well, trained you to smile, to be agreeable, to avoid conflict at all costs. But now you're seeing the cost clearly. And the receipt reads, your needs, your voice, your authenticity. And maybe that's what hurts the most, not the absence of love, but the realization that you abandoned yourself for love that was never real. So you sit with that pain. And for the first time, you don't numb it. You don't distract it with productivity or scrolling or proving your worth. You let it rise. And in that rising, something holy returns. Your standards. Not the ones shaped by fear, but the ones shaped by truth. You begin to expect more, not from arrogance, but from healing. You begin to say no, not from coldness, but from clarity. You begin to walk away, not to punish, but to protect. You no longer mistake kindness for connection. You no longer confuse tolerance for compatibility. You no longer bema for breadcrumbs and call it love. Because when you stop saying, I'm fine, you stop settling for anything that forces you to lie. And in this new space, where your honesty is not just allowed, but honored, you begin to feel alive again. Maybe it's quiet at first. Maybe you still flinch when someone asks, how are you really? Maybe your voice still trembles when you say, actually, I'm not okay. But tremble anyway. Speak anyway. Show up anyway. Because authenticity doesn't require perfection. It only requires presence. And slowly, things begin to change. You notice that some people lean in when you're honest. They don't run. They don't rescue. They just stay. They hold space for your mess. They honor your confusion. They don't try to fix you. They simply see you. These are the people you never noticed when you were too busy performing. But now they feel like home. Because home is not a place. It's a person who says, you don't have to be fine to be loved. And when you find that, or become that, everything transforms. You start showing up to life without a mask. You laugh without watching who's watching. You cry without apologizing. You rest without justifying. You no longer exist to keep the peace. You are the peace because you're finally honest. And it's here, in this sacred honesty, that Nietzsche's deeper warning becomes clear. Those who say, it's fine, too often lose their ability to trust their own pain. They begin to doubt their own reality. They gaslight themselves before anyone else can. They become fluent in denial and call it strength. But denial is not strength. Strength is choosing truth, even when it threatens your old life. Strength is telling someone, that hurt me, even if they call you dramatic, even if they leave. Strength is honoring your nervous system, walking away from chaos instead of romanticizing it, because your nervous system remembers everything you've ever swallowed. It remembers the smiles you gave through betrayal, the hugs you gave to people who broke you, the nights you cried and still showed up the next morning saying, don't worry, I'm fine. But now you remember too, and you make a new vow. No more lying to protect others. No more shrinking to be accepted. No more betraying yourself in the name of being easy to love. Because love that asks you to hide is not love. It's control. Affection that depends on your silence is not intimacy. It's convenience. So now you begin again, with deeper eyes, sharper boundaries, softer truths. You no longer yell to be heard. You speak quietly and watch who listens. You no longer explain your worth. You embody it and let others adjust. You no longer overstay in places that starve your spirit. Because you've seen what happens when you say, "It's fine," too many times. You lose yourself. And now that you've found even a piece of yourself again, you're not willing to go back, even if it means being misunderstood, even if it means walking alone for a while, even if it means leaving behind the life that once felt safe. Because now you want more than safe. You want true. You want deep. You want real. And real begins with you. Not the version of you shaped by silence, but the one emerging from it. The one who now whispers, "I matter. My feelings are valid. My truth deserves space." And in that whisper, that quiet, unshakable knowing, you rise. Not as someone who has it all figured out, but as someone who finally stopped pretending. And the moment you stop pretending, you begin to truly live.